it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow, so just do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it!
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. This episode is brought to you by Praxis. Guys, if you've been listening for a while and you're inspired to drop out, grind, and succeed and to start turning your dreams into reality, Praxis helps you go from student to startup in just 9 months, okay? To land your dream job or to start your own company, you don't need to sit in more classrooms or blast out resumes or go through years of training. You can start today. Praxis combines a 3-month professional bootcamp with a 6-month paid apprenticeship at a startup that leads directly to a full-time job. And startups aren't just for coders, by the way. There's sales positions, marketing, operations. Even if you're not sure what you're interested in, Praxis places you with a growing, dynamic company where you get paid to do work you love to do, where you get to become part of a team, and where you learn how to create value. It's not just an internship, it's real work. In addition to the apprenticeship, you complete an intensive education program that combines professional development training, skill building projects, and one-on-one coaching. You'll leave the program with a full-time job offer and the skills and experiences you'll need to work for any company that you want to work for or to even start your own company. No degree is required to get started on your career, guys. Whether you're an ambitious go-getter right out of high school, a creative thinker who's bored in college, or a college grad looking forward to something better than more school or a cubicle job, Praxis is a phenomenal resource for you. $50,000. Okay, $50,000 is the average salary that Praxis graduates are getting with these full-time jobs that they get right after the program in less than a year. If you want to learn more, go to discoverpraxis.com, discoverpraxis.com, and let them know that you found out about them through Successful Dropout and start turning your dreams into reality, guys. And with that being said, let's get to the show. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Kyle Gray. Kyle is the founder of Conversion Cake, a business that he started while still in school that specializes in content strategy and sales funnels. He's also the author of The College Entrepreneur, which is a book on how to leverage your university to build a business, escape the rat race, and live life on your own terms. In the past, he worked as a content manager for WP Curve, and he helped them grow to nearly $1 million in annual recurring revenue. So Kyle, that's the intro I have for you, man, but tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Thanks so much for having me, Kylan, and that was an awesome intro. A lot of what I do these days is either working with businesses and developing a really good content marketing strategy and putting around and setting them up with the right tools they need to really execute on those strategies. A lot of people try and get into content marketing and they're like, okay, we need a blog, and they just kind of throw a bunch of content out there and see what happens. And there's no real directed approach. And so I help equip businesses with that kind of methodical approach that I learned and used while at WP Curve. What's also something really interesting going on right now is I'm working at a startup incubator at the University of Utah called the Foundry at the Lassonde Center, which is kind of an entrepreneurship program. And it's basically a mastermind for students. So students will get together and they'll meet once a week, talk about their plans for this week, what they hope to achieve, how they want to grow their business, and some of the problems that they're having. And our idea is that students can teach each other in this phase better than any kind of entrepreneur gurus or any kind of course. They have their fingers on the pulse of new things, and they're learning and exploring and working on that. And so we want to empower the students to teach themselves through that. And that's I'm really excited about it because it's a really cool place to kind of test out a lot of the ideas that I write about in the College Entrepreneur. I love empowering students to figure out ways that they can really take initiative on a project they really enjoy, whether it's building out a personal brand, maybe starting a business, or building out some skills and trying to break into a certain industry, and using their class time to really do that and relate to the real world, or using their university's money or systems or different resources and support to do that. And so it's been a fun place to be.
Awesome. Now, you are a bit different from a lot of the guests we have on the show because you actually didn't drop out, and you have a really unique perspective on entrepreneurship and education and entrepreneurship happening while still in university. And I'd love you to share a bit about that. That's what the book is about. So tell me what that's all about.
Yeah. So if anything, and I'm not sure if this is, an advisable approach, but I remember I was working as a advisor in the study abroad office at the University of Utah as well. And I thought this was going to be my dream job. I love to travel. I had done a couple of different internships and jobs in South America before landing this job, and everything interesting that I had done in my life, in one way or another, was motivated by travel, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And so I kept hearing about these people, these entrepreneurs that were growing businesses, working from their laptops, being totally location independent, and building wealth while traveling. And I thought that was totally amazing. And I really, wanted to break into that space, but I had a lot of doubts for a long time. I always associated kind of entrepreneurs or business people with, somebody up in the corner office of a glass building,
like Richard Branson or
not even so
Trump.
Generous. Yeah, more Donald Trump, or like somebody who's just ready to sign the contract to go bulldoze the Ecuadorian village and get the oil.
Right.
And I think that's a really
Do you think that's a common perception?
I think it is. And it's really interesting, and there could be a whole nother podcast episode about maybe that perception, but mm-hmm. I think it actually works in favor of the people, who are truly embody that stereotype. I think that keeps a lot of people from breaking into entrepreneurship or trying to make their own things or trying to, do something, because if they are trying to pursue something and make profit or make money, then they kind of associate that with, those kind of people, the
right.
greedy executives.
Right.
Which ends up in some ways, benefiting the greedy executives, because then, if we aren't becoming entrepreneurs, then we're probably still just kind of staying consumers and
right.
watching more commercials and buying more.
Yeah, who do you think pays their paychecks? Yeah.
Exactly. But anyway, so I wanted to break in, but I didn't know. I had that idea, and I didn't have any. I didn't know of any skills, and so I decided to actually go back to school and get a master's degree, and it was convenient at the time because I was able to work in the study abroad office full time and get a tuition discount. And I chose a program that was a master's program that was really flexible. And so I could pick and choose different courses. And I thought that somehow through this process, I was going to learn how to be an entrepreneur. And that's really what I wanted to focus on, was building out those skill sets. And right. Luckily, what I found my biggest advantage in this case was kind of the flexibility of the program. I started educating myself and practicing. In the summer before, I started to build these niche AdSense websites like plaidpants.org or something, where people, try to capture a really obscure keyword and drive traffic to it, and then make money on the clicks, that on the ad clicks. And so that's really how I got started at first, and just, I didn't make a terrible amount of money, but I learned how to build some sites, and I learned some basic skills, and I was better off than I was before, and I could build on that skill set. But I did find a couple of professors that were interested in what I were doing and were willing to work with me to do it. And so I was able to arrange some directed readings, and trying to build my business, during that time, and then reporting on how that was going, the progress I was making, or what I had learned each week. And that was a really cool opportunity to kind of experiment with a couple of other ideas. I had to go through test out a lot of ideas to see like what I really liked, what I could end up sticking with, and what I thought I was good enough at.
Yeah.
And so I actually also started participating in the earlier version of the Foundry, that program I was discussing with you, and that being a part of a community and being around a bunch of people who were trying to all figure that out really changed a lot of my perspectives. For the first time, I actually really did get to see and meet people who were trying to be entrepreneurs, which dispelled that earlier image I had, of the greedy executive. Mm-hmm. And I was around a bunch of people who, everybody else thought I was totally crazy when I was like, I just want to build up a business and be able to travel the world and work from my laptop. And most people are like, that's nuts. But in this community, people, are like, that's totally achievable. Let's do that together. And so I grew a lot from that. And I also from my experience as a academic advisor, I learned that, there was a lot of things I learned kind of behind the scenes, how universities worked, and how to get your way, that a lot of students don't really realize. I think a lot of students see their university as kind of like this hive, like this beehive that everybody, there's maybe one queen bee and everybody's working towards this singular goal of education or whatever. And it's totally not the case. It's much more like, a scene out of Game of Thrones where there's a whole bunch of different people, plotting, and there's some people that have this objective, and
good illustration.
The kingdom of business is battling against the kingdom of engineering for the attention of the president, or more academic prestige or whatever.
Right.
And so I kind of understood that world, and so just knowing that, I started to see what levers I could pull to make interesting things happen, such as I went to the events coordinators and proposed that they bring this guy named Mark Manson, who just released a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And if you can withstand a huge amount of profanity, it's actually an amazing, really powerful book. And I recommend you guys check it out. But so I talked to him. I talked to one of the administrators and said, okay, this is who Mark Manson is. This is what he does. He wants to talk about some of these things. Can I have some money to pay him to come? And within, not too many conversations, it was a fairly easy process to convince him that this was a good investment. They had leftover events budget, and most of the time, I understood as a previous administrator that administrators most of the time are scratching their heads, wondering, how am I going to get students to take interest in anything I do? And so if you're a student and you go up to them and you have an idea for them, then they get all kinds of excited and want to help you out. And that's something I don't think a lot of students realize, that they have that power or can take advantage of it. And so, within a few conversations, I was able to get enough of a budget to fly my, somebody who I saw as my hero out to my university, have them speak. They helped me with marketing. And so I was able to fill the room with interested students and, fill it with some pizza too. And all the pizza got eaten and it was a hit success. And so now all of a sudden I've done a big favor for this person I really admire. And so I think students can take, a lot of advice, or advice from that, in that, you're able to do a lot of that too. Also, another thing I realized as a student, that I kind of had to learn being a professional for a couple of years, was just the power of saying I'm a student. And I think this is the best tool that any student has, while at university, is just being able to call up. I called up a lot of local businesses and just say, hey, I'm a student. I'm trying to learn about online marketing. I'm trying to learn about conversion optimization. I'm trying to learn about search engine optimization. And I was wondering if I could come in and talk to you guys and see what you're doing. And usually, if I was very easily able to get a hold of like founders of local businesses or interesting thought leaders that I knew online, and either get them on the phone. Sometimes I recorded a phone call and shared it with the Foundry community, or sometimes, they'd offer to take me out to lunch or give me a tour of their company. But generally people are really, there's a cultural aspect of being a student, and people feel really good helping students. It makes them feel all warm and generous. And even if it's something like, especially when you get to share, your ideas and reflect, you're like, a student's coming to talk to me. I feel really cool. And so there's a huge advantage there, especially if you want to start a business or break into a certain industry. If you know what you want and you know who you need to connect with to get those things, you have tremendous power as a student that I simply don't have now as a marketer or an entrepreneur, calling up those same businesses now that I did a couple of years ago, even with a bigger skill, more skills, more case studies. It's a lot less likely that they're going to be interested in talking to me if just out of a cold call like I did before.
So now with something like the Foundry, it sounds like you were obviously able to, you worked in the system, you got to see how it worked, and then you have resources like the Foundry. And when you were studying, you mentioned you had a lot of freedom to kind of sort of design your course and get some professors on your side. Is that pretty typical for a lot of universities? And if not, what are the best things that a student listening can do to try to create that sort of environment around them?
So, yeah, there's definitely, it varies from university to university and your field of study. Some of this is not going to be very reasonable for example, like an engineering student, because they have very regimented and specific and very crowded, schedules. They're working really hard all of the time. And, just you can only take so many classes a semester. But if this is something that you're really interested in, I would either suggest adding a major or a minor, or changing your minor to something that's a little more flexible and a little more open. And a lot of large public universities in particular these days have programs, they're typically called undergraduate studies, where you can actually build a customized major according to kind of what your vision is or what skills you want to learn. That's totally possible. There's also a lot more, the liberal arts majors that are sometimes kind of maligned as a not very useful major, actually usually do have a lot of very flexible classes or kind of ways that you can design that major to what you're doing. And also, not necessarily just within your what you're doing for your schoolwork, or you might not always be able to connect your exact coursework with your business. But there's lots of resources, just kind of extracurricular things. I think most universities have a budget for student-run clubs. And so if you wanted to put together a student-run club, something that around something that you're interested in, or you're based on a theme that your personal brand is working on, or possibly talking to or about your ideal customers. Like, so I'm in Utah right now, and there's a lot of skiers around. And say I was a student that really enjoyed skiing and photography, creating the ski photography club.
Right.
And most universities have, would allow a couple of grand, depending on how many students you have registered in the club, but to put on events, get supplies for your club, invite speakers to come. And so there's lots of money just kind of sitting on the table right there that an intrepid student could take advantage of. So there's lots of different ways you can swing it, and depending also, I know a lot of universities are open to custom internships. So if you do end up meeting an entrepreneur that you really want to work for, or a small business that needs the skill that you want to develop, there's lots of ways that you could arrange a custom internship with. Sometimes it's with the career services program, or sometimes it's with a separate internship program. But take advantage of those times, and it's definitely okay to work for free if you're inside the company or developing the exact skills that you want to develop. Because I think a lot of the problems students have when they graduate, and I think why a lot of students are dropping out, is because they're totally disconnected from the real world. And I'm doing the little quote fingers right here. They just most of the time they're just in their classwork, and they know this real world where they have to cook and pay taxes and car insurance and also kind of be like a professional human being exists. But for most of our education, long before college, in middle school and in high school, they're always saying, things are about to get real. Once you graduate and go to middle or high school, then things are going to be real serious.
Right.
And in high school, they're always telling you, yeah, things are about to get really serious in college, so you better be ready. And but they never actually bridge the gap between the real world. And so doing an internship in a place that is exactly aligned with your goals or what you want to do is an excellent way to start building those connections with the real world. And everything I was kind of saying before, just finding any excuse you can to connect your studies, connect your work with something that's happening in the real world and something that's aligned with your goals.
I see.
Very
cool. Now, say I'm a student and I've just read, let's say, 4 Hour Work Week, and have you read that book at all, Kyle, by the way?
That was the one that poisoned my mind to this whole thing.
I wondered.
I was never able to come back. I read that while I was working as a study abroad advisor, and I was like, oh my gosh. It's an excellent book to, I don't think everything is like as easy or as possible as he outlines in the book, but it just shows you like a totally different like this is really what's out there, and you can pursue things in this direction that ways I'd never considered.
Exactly. I wondered that, because that's usually the case for somebody that just all of a sudden had a really quick shift in their mindset of entrepreneurship like that. It usually has something to do with Tim Ferriss, but it was the same for me. But say I'm a student that read 4 Hour Work Week, and I understand I would not take that book 100% literally. I don't know if you're an ambitious human being, I don't even know if you want to get to the point where you're just working 4 hours a week. I think it's more about just the mindset. But say I read that book and I'm a student in college, and I really have latched onto that idea like you did about starting a business and working from my laptop, being location independent. But I wanted to finish my degree. Because I think you can provide a real unique perspective here, Kyle, because the majority of the guests that we get on the show, they say, well, if you've reached that, here's a few things to do before you drop out, but then by all means drop out and start building your business. Now, for somebody that doesn't want to do that, what are some practical steps they can take to build that business and still finish their degree?
Again, I think, the most important thing that for me in my life, and this could be biased, but I think I credit a lot of my success to relationships that I've developed with people that were, much further along than I was, and were willing to make a bet on me or what I was doing. And so I would say, if you're a student, depending on how ambitious your business idea is, if you want to create, Facebook or something, then you might need all of your time to do that. But if it's just kind of a smaller business, or you want to break into a certain industry, then start building out a personal brand, and start using some of the strategies I just discussed earlier. Use your university to connect you with interesting people, and start writing about what you're learning and sharing that online, and create what Seth Godin calls it a trail of magic. So just put together this a blog or some videos, or whatever medium you think you can work in, and start creating and share what you're learning, and try and help people, and try and create something valuable. And if you're able to create a following around that, then if you have your following, then by the time you graduate, you're and you have a lot more bandwidth for your business, you're going to be in a lot better shape. If you have good relationships around your business, then that could be your next big customer base. It could be the people who end up giving you some financing or working with you on whatever you're doing. So there's a lot of different ways that you can grow out your business while finishing your degree.
I see. So the two main things, it sounded like you said, were start developing those relationships, networking, finding the people that are already where you want to be, and then also start building that personal brand. And I think you hit it on the head there, Kyle, when you said, even if you might know that you want to be an entrepreneur, you might maybe even have a few ideas, but maybe you're not quite sure, the best thing you can still do is to get a website, start that blog, just start, like you said, leaving that paper trail is a great starting point and practical step.
Fire and shoot some ideas out there. Really, document your ideas and share them, and be really bold about it. And that's something that, even to this day, I have trouble with, because it's scary to share a lot of your ideas, because you think people are just going to be like, you're outrageous, go away. One really cool article I read was by this guy named Garen Eikenberry, I believe his last name is, and if I remember right, he had just graduated with his MBA and was pretty disappointed and wasn't sure, what his job prospects were. And so he decided to do this experiment for a month, where he sent 10 ideas to a person or a company every day. And so whether it was, an organization he wanted to work with, I think he sent some to James Altucher to how to improve his newsletter or something like that. He sent some to some MMA people that he was really interested in, but he was super generous with his ideas. And these ideas weren't just kind of like random, 2-minute brainstorm kind of things. He was really trying to do his research and find ways to genuinely add value to these people that he was coming into contact with. And at the end of the month, he had 4 or 5 different offers for what he called dream jobs, 10 Skype calls, and a couple of other potential collaboration opportunities. And so doing something like that as a student, I think is an excellent idea to, again, build those relationships, start building those connections, and, document those ideas online. Because again, whether if you're not sure you want to start a business, or even if, I like to talk to the people, because a lot of people simply don't want to be entrepreneurs, but I still think having an entrepreneurial skill set in this day and age is essential. And building out a personal brand like that is going to outshine any resume that you could ever create. Resumes are dull, they're boring, they're terrible. And I never, ever want to be in a situation where it's my single piece of paper in a pile of 100 pieces of paper and somebody gives me a half a second to look at it. If you have a personal brand together, you have, people following you or commenting on what you're doing, and it just, you just can tell when somebody puts some real love into what they're doing and creates this high quality thing. No matter if it's a podcast or a YouTube channel or some photos or a blog, it's going to set you way apart than most of the students who are just graduating and maybe they got A's on their papers, but your grade point average doesn't matter, and they're just going through, doing the bare minimum to get the degree, which is not useful as far as just by itself.
Yeah, I love that point about the entrepreneurial mindset. And even though there's people listening, I know that they don't want to be entrepreneurs, they don't want to own their own business. That entrepreneurial mindset, if you're an employee with an entrepreneurial mindset, you are miles ahead of everybody else. And so, yeah, don't have the wrong perception of entrepreneurs that they're just these greedy executives. It's a mindset. It's a mindset that says, how can I provide as much value as possible? Where is a problem that I can solve? It's the opposite of a defeatist kind of mentality. And again, the resume point is great. It's nowadays, and you'll see like big companies like Google and stuff are starting to pay more attention to this. It's all about the value proposition. How much value can you provide? And, as an employer myself, the last thing I really care about is where you went to school or what your grade point average was. It's about what kind of value can you provide, and you will, the wealth that you acquire in your life will be directly proportionate to the value that you can provide.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one big thing, I am trying to instill in the students I'm working with right now, and everybody I kind of encounter, and even more so in myself, is just focus on how you can add value to other people. You need to start asking those questions right away, because nobody asks those questions. In most of life, everybody's kind of worried about how they're going to get their own. But you'll get huge results if you just focus on how can I really make this person's life better.
Oh yeah, the earlier the better, man. So Kyle, tell me about Conversion Cake, what that's all about, what you do, and how that got started. Let's talk about that.
So again, Conversion Cake started when I was in the Foundry, and there was a couple of things going on. I think I decided I wanted to get into conversion optimization, which is a little bit different than the service I offer now, but it's basically if you have a website and 100 people visit it every day, and there's one button on it that you want them to click. If 10 people click on it, then you've got a 10% conversion rate. And so my job would be to come in, look at your website, figure out, is there a way that we can boost that number? So can we make the button bigger? Can we put some more encouraging words to click the button? Can we move the button to a different part of the page? Can we change the color of the button? And this fascinated me because it seemed like such an interesting mix of art and science, where you were changing design, you were working with words, which were both things that were really interesting to me, and then you used data and analytics to kind of see what is working and what's happening. Mm-hmm. And so that really stuck with me, and so I wanted to learn how to break into that. And so I started as a student, and again, just kind of making cold calls to some companies that I knew, and I actually ended up at a dinner with a lot of alumni from the Foundry. I was mentioning that's what I did to a past member of the Foundry who was really interested in it and wanted to offer me the chance to give it a try on his startup. And so within a couple of days, I jumped right on it. And it was given, like, they paid for the tools I wanted to use, and they gave me a desk at this startup, and I just started like cracking away a couple of times a week at at these different experiments on how to increase conversions or lead generations on a bunch of different things. And so slowly but surely, I got more clients either by word of mouth, and slowly I either started charging for what I was doing or raising the price of what I was doing. And by the time I graduated, I did have a good brand around this, or at least a start of a brand and a couple of good case studies, which led to right as I finished. Or right as I graduated, one of the people I had come in contact with, his name was Dan Norris, who was a prolific content marketer, and he ran this startup called WP Curve, which you mentioned a little bit earlier.
Yeah. And
the startup, the service it provides is fairly simple. It's just they're like a handyman for websites. If you have a glitch on your WordPress site, or a plugin's not working, or things aren't displaying quite right, any fix that it would take a developer 30 minutes or less to fix, then you get unlimited of those for a flat fee. And he was totally driving his traffic to his site and growing his customers only with content marketing. And so basically the goal was to write really good and interesting blog posts that spoke to the target audience, and just build a relationship with them. Again, going back to what we were saying earlier, this is an online version of how can I add value to these people.
Yeah.
And he was looking for somebody to join his team and help take over the blog. He had just finished publishing his first book, or he was in the process of doing it when he hired me, the 7-Day Startup, and wanted to really free up some bandwidth around that. So I hopped on the team and started trying to grow this single person blog into this larger content marketing team and system. And and so that's kind of how I a lot of the experience I had with Conversion Cake definitely helped me become, or be a good candidate for this job. But I learned mountains more while working for a startup, while being immersed in that environment, and learning hands-on from people who were several years ahead of me in kind of their business experience and their connections and their knowledge. And so, working with them was a huge leap forward in my skill set, and I'm able to provide a lot more value to my customers. I'm still using Conversion Cake today, but a lot of what I help people with, and a lot of what I do now is as a result of working for those people. And so it's interesting. I've transitioned between business owner to employee, or here and there, but I think that's a super good place for a lot of people, especially speaking to your audience in particular. If you're considering dropping out, think about if you really want to be an entrepreneur, maybe instead of starting your own business right away, are working underneath somebody who you really admire, whose results you want in your life, and who can kind of accelerate your learning curve.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, currently, do you generate most of your revenue through Conversion Cake or other kinds of clients, or?
Yeah. So a lot of what I'm doing is just through Conversion Cake. I have a couple of clients where I'm putting together Facebook ad campaigns and email marketing sequences, or just landing page, or a really big thing right now is we call them lead magnets, which are just downloadable content that you would trade your email to get. So it could be a report, a checklist, infographics, whatever. But a lot of the businesses I'm working with are really interested in capturing an email providing some really good value in exchange for that email. And then what I really like to do is create email sequences that kind of follow up. A lot of people try to push for a sale right away, but I really, again, going back to the value, I just like to send some emails that are with different content, whatever they have available, or different tips related to the product that they downloaded, and help them, just get to know the business a little bit better. See some of the content that's maybe it's a couple of months old and it doesn't get the search engine results, but it's still really decent content. And so having email sequences with that. Or if a company is just totally starting out new, they have a good business model, they have a lot of customers, but they just haven't started with content marketing, then we can start with the bare bones of like putting together a content marketing strategy, organizing how we're going to publish these things, putting together a style guide and a process for writing a blog post so that they're consistent and high quality and happening at a regular pace, which are kind of a lot of the key elements of a successful content marketing plan. And so that's what's mostly paying the bills right now. The book provides a little bit of side revenue, and that's great. And I'm mostly reinvesting that into my own personal brand or making new connections, training, and I'd like to create something, a bigger product or a bigger service or something in the future that kind of helps students with a lot of the ideas that I discuss in the book, or provides a community for them similar to like what I've been discussing in the Foundry.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that too, maybe some other time. So tell me about what you would consider to be your worst entrepreneurial moment today. Just tell us that story really quick.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of them. I think there's a lot of times where. Okay, yeah, I'll tell this one. So I was applying for a different. This was an apprenticeship, and so I was applying for there was this island resort that needed an online marketer to help them. And this was before I was a little bit into Conversion Cake. I was just about to graduate as a student, and I thought this was the perfect way. It was a resort in the Philippines, and a lot of entrepreneurs that I know that are traveling around the world like to stop by there. And so it was a well kind of reviewed place, and I had my heart set on it. And they asked me to make this application video, most people, when they make an application video, it's pretty much just them sitting in front of a camera and talking about what they're doing. Right. And somehow I got it into my head that I needed to do something really different. And I got a couple of good cameras, and living in Utah, it was still the middle of winter. But I thought it would be really funny to be sitting in a sauna and working on my laptop while just sweaty or something, to be trained to work in the hot islands. And I made this video, and I think this idea that I was so set on, and it was actually I think the filming and the video quality was actually quite good. But just the concept of me sitting in a sauna was kind of weird and confusing, and just but I was so set on it. And a couple of my friends were like, I don't know, maybe you should just talk into the camera. And I'm like, no, that's boring. It's never going to work. And so there's been a lot of, I don't know if that was my worst or darkest moment, but that is a tendency that I have to kind of get latched onto this idea and totally have these blinders and just drive it into the ground. And I've seen it happen a couple of different other times over the course of my entrepreneurial career. And someday, I'm not there yet, but stay tuned. I will share that video, but I'm
oh, come on.
I have to I don't know. I have to steel myself, or put a couple more years between it. So it's just a a good memory.
Hey, now
Yeah.
could be the time, man. I could just put a quick link in the description below this episode, and when it's
Maybe I will. Gosh, that would be maybe it's time to do it.
so I take it you did not get the apprenticeship then. They didn't get the joke.
I was super close actually. They sent me an email. They were like, yeah, everything you did looked really good. It seemed like you had a lot of good referrals and a lot of stuff. But that video, man, it was just not. He said something along the lines, it was not appropriate for a job application. And again, another lesson from this is know your audience. And I just don't think the person that was in charge at the time was the type that was open to kind of funny, goofy stuff like that.
Yeah, because I would have hired you, man, if it was that and a bunch of people just staring into a camera.
Oh man,
I get it.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. It's totally goofy.
Okay, so on the flip side of that, if you could share more of an aha moment, kind of a success story from your experience.
Yeah. So I think one really good success story actually comes from the book, The College Entrepreneur. And so before this was a book, I was kind of working on this idea for over a year. And I really thought it was going to be an online course. And I had developed a bunch of lessons, wrote a bunch of outlines, created presentations, and put the whole thing together 2 whole times. And one time I launched it, but I had done most of the recording when I was living in Thailand. I was living on an island called Koh Phangan in the middle of this bungalow in the jungle, and you just can't really get very good audio quality. There was cicadas in the background and dogs and.
Were you living there just doing stuff with Conversion Cake or something, or was it for another person?
I was working with WP Curve most of the time. So my boss lived in Australia. And so it was really convenient to live in Thailand because it's a very similar time zone. But it was nicer to live in Thailand because you could leverage the company was a U.S. company. But anyway, so I leveraged a U.S. salary while living in Thailand, which makes things a lot easier.
No kidding. Okay, so sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. So the first time there were just jungle noises. And then the second time I took painstaking measures to make sure the audio quality. I was actually in Thailand again about 8 months later. And I had released the course, but I just wasn't feeling that good about it. And I had a lot of these ideas that I've shared with you on this podcast and some more, but it didn't seem to be hitting the mark, or it didn't feel that thing. And I kind of realized at the end of that the big thing that was missing were these little stories and these little personal kind of revelations that I could share and I could contribute. And that was kind of the aha moment. And that's when I decided that it needed to be a book, because it was writing was something that I had done for a very long time, and I think I could do very well, and putting it into a story format was something that seemed really feasible and easy. And so I began, I took the pieces of these kind of failed, mediocre online courses and turned it into this book that, it's still very new, but it's made Amazon bestseller, and it's been getting a lot of good reviews, and it's really starting to have the impact that I wanted to have. And so I think through learning to bring my personal story into this and share a little bit more of myself, it made it a lot more relatable to the people who I wanted to communicate with. And so that was a big win, a big aha moment.
If you could time travel back to day one of your entrepreneurial journey and have 10 minutes with your former self to communicate any lessons you've acquired with the intention of saving yourself mistakes and heartache, what would you tell yourself?
This is something I still struggle with today, but I would tell myself again to start building a brand, to start writing, to start collecting my lessons and adventures into a format that people can relate with. Again, for me, it seems like the case is writing. A lot of people are really great at making video, but I would tell myself to get started on that. And I still to this day struggle with imposter syndrome, where I'm like, well, yeah, I did do that, but it wasn't that cool of a result compared to this other guy, or everybody's already heard about, this kind of split testing strategy, or, everybody's been to Thailand before, so nobody really cares what my take on Chiang Mai is, or something like that. And so I struggle with that all the time, and I would say that I would sit myself down and point that thing out as the main enemy to be vanquished, and to start, and also another thing is don't be afraid to invest in yourself. I remember as a student, like looking at something like StrengthsFinder, the book, and it's $10 or something, and I was just like, oh my God, I can't. $10, I can't afford the book. It has a cool test, and maybe I'll learn from some stuff for myself, or like getting a website. Like, oh my God, $9 a month for hosting, or like a domain every year. I have to pay all that, and I think like that's a terrible philosophy to have. I think you should always be willing to make a bet on yourself if it is going to advance your craft, or your business, or what you really want to do. If it's a bet on yourself, like, oh man, I really think I could be better with skis, or like some new skis, that's kind of a different story. And so there's a subtle difference in there. But yeah, I think you should always be willing to make a bet on yourself, whether it's sharing your ideas or investing in what you do.
What's a personal habit that you believe contributes to the success you've achieved so far?
I try and meditate every morning, and I'm a fairly peaceful and calm and even-minded person to the outside world, but I'm an evil tyrant internally. Sometimes I'm very self-critical. I'm working on all these things. There's a lot of times I'll wrestle with doubt, or a lot of these things, and actually when I was right when I had graduated, I had found, or I was in really, really bad shape, because I had found myself in this kind of loop, this thought loop of like, oh, you're not working hard enough to achieve these dreams, or you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, and really getting stressed out. And I started grinding my teeth a lot at night, and through meditation and just waking up and doing it the first thing in the morning, and just trying to really set the tone for my whole day of just observing my thoughts and being calm. And also I particularly focus on gratitude, because if you can focus right in the beginning of the day, not on all the things you have to do that day, or whatever happened in social media in the 12 hours since you checked your phone before, if you can just really focus on gratitude, then the tasks or the challenges that may seem insurmountable on the day, or in your life that you have to face, especially as an entrepreneur, really you're able to handle those better.
Yeah, love it, especially since those are all things I struggle with myself as well. What's a quality that you have, Kyle, that you would consider essential to being an entrepreneur?
So I think I'm good at building relationships, and so I kind of shudder to hear the word networking, because that sounds like such a self-interested.
Yeah, like network marketing and all this stuff you always hear about. Yeah, I get it.
And so again, building relationships, figuring out, I like to listen between the lines. I'll give you a great story. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So one of my clients that I worked with early on, he was a guy that I really liked, and we got along, and we were chatting sometimes in his office, and he had this idea. He was like, yeah, I really like, we should build an e-commerce store around Thai fisherman pants.
What? No way.
Yeah. And so these pants are like really loose fitting pants, and they kind of have this built-in belt kind of thing. And, but anyway, he was like, yeah, I really like them because when I bend over to pick something up or, do something, my butt crack doesn't show. And, this is like just kind of a
great selling point.
Yeah. Just like a funny, goofy story, in the middle of things. But, a year or two later, I'm in Thailand, and I had a pair of these fisherman pants, and I remembered that story, and so I ended up buying a pair for this guy, and I came home on a little bit before Christmas, and ended up shipping a pair to him with just like a little card, like remembering that little conversation. And so I think listening between the lines like that, and really, kind of connecting with people in these little human elements. Also, as an entrepreneur, you want to do good work, and all of that is assumed in what I'm saying here. But just being able to connect with people in their kind of interesting and human and funny ways. And I think I'm really good at doing that on a small scale, and building these key relationships just by really hearing people out.
Yeah, I won't include this part on the actual podcast, but I laughed because I've had that exact same conversation with a buddy about Thai fisherman pants. He went to Thailand and he brought some back, and he's like, dude, these are amazing. And I own a yoga studio with my wife.
The yoga every time. That might fault yoga.
Yeah. That's like, I wore those and I was like, dude, these could be great. And he was a rock climber. And so we were like, dude, it's great for rock climbers and guys who do yoga that want to kind of still wear pants. So we thought about it. We were like, let's start it. And we did a little bit of research on Amazon. It didn't go anywhere, but that's hilarious.
Yeah. It'd be tough margins on that thing, but that's funny.
Yeah.
There's, there might be something there now.
Who knows? Okay. Kyle, tell us about a business book that you would recommend to us and why.
Oh man. So I'm actually gonna be defiant, and I'm gonna recommend a fiction book, but
go for it.
There's this book called Shogun by James Clavell that everybody must read. And so, I'm somebody that really enjoyed the Game of Thrones books. I really like that kind of intrigue. And this is very similar, but it's an English sailor who ends up in Japan in kind of the late 1500s, 1600s, and they're at war with Spain and Portugal, who have been in been in Japan for a while, and he kind of has to figure out how to survive. He doesn't speak the local language, and the only people that speak his language are his enemies at war. And so this character has to be very, very clever in a lot of ways. And I think everybody should aspire to the cleverness and the brilliance and the boldness that this main character, his name's Blackthorn, has. And there are so many moments where you just think things are going in one direction, and it turns out that Blackthorn has had this ace up his sleeve, or he makes this bet that just totally changes the direction of things, and you're just like, oh my goodness, you're just in awe. And I think I found myself when reading that book, putting together a mantra of what would Blackthorn do in this situation, and trying to think like he did. And it's so much fun, and it's a huge book, so be prepared. But between all of the other books that your listeners are reading, and if you just need a fiction break, check that one out. And there's still huge value when you're examining these characters and how they solve these problems.
Awesome. We'll have a link to that book in the show notes as well. what's an internet resource, kind of like Evernote, that you'd recommend to us?
I think Rescue Time is a really, really good one. If Rescue Time is just an app, you can have it on your web browser, or you can have it as an app on your computer, and I recommend doing both. It just tracks where you're spending your time on your computer. And me, definitely like struggle with productivity sometimes, or I'll be watching one extra episode on Netflix, or goofing around online where I shouldn't be. And this tracks it all together, so you can see at the end of the week exactly how you spent all your time on your computer. And you can even categorize different things to say, like, okay, when I'm on these sites or doing these things, these are very productive things, or when I'm on these sites or doing these things, they're not so productive. And so you can really start to get some analytics on how you're spending your time. And it's probably at first going to be totally horrifying, because you'll find, like, maybe on a good week, you're like 50% of your time on your computer was spent doing actual productive things, and then the rest was spent, just kind of on games or whatever your pleasure is. And just being able to see that, and kind of, it also tells you, like, this week was 6% better than last week, and just being able to measure that gives you a tool to really assess that and address that problem. Because if you don't know exactly how much time you're spending, then you don't really think about how much, how valuable or unvaluable that is. And
right.
So it's definitely worth doing, especially for somebody who wants to be a little more productive.
I'm gonna have to check that out. What advice do you have for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out of college to be an entrepreneur, or maybe even just to land their dream job, but they haven't quite made that step yet? Just some parting pieces of advice.
Yeah. So even though I've spent an extensive amount of time at a university, and I'm currently working for one right now, I'm very dropout neutral, where I think that dropping out in this day and age is a very viable thing for a lot of young students, especially who want to break into entrepreneurship. There's a lot of really good ways, especially if you compare, investing your tuition in other ways, that you can really get these skills, make these connections, and do these things. But I think you absolutely need to know what you're doing, or you need to be able to drop into something. I don't think that you should just drop out because you're like, well, this school system is a bunch of crap, and I don't want to, I don't like the way this professor talked to me, or,
right.
You need to be able to say, okay, well, I have my business, and I have a few customers already, so we've got some traction here, and I, have some money saved up if things get rough. You need to, and you should have a support system in place. Tell your family, if you're close with your family, and talk to them about that, and see how they feel. That they may not support you immediately up front, but it's good to know who has your back when you choose to make a big move like this. And or have a good apprenticeship lined up where you can work hand in hand with a really good entrepreneur who's giving you the chance to take the wheel of their business. Usually that'll be for a little bit of a lower salary at first, but if you're getting paid to learn these key skills, then that's absolutely worth it. So have something to drop into and know what your options are, and also know what you're leaving behind. Hopefully, throughout this podcast, I've given you a couple of different ideas on different ways that you can use your university to help grow your business. But if you want to leave, make sure that, you're not leaving some good opportunities behind, just because, you feel like your current situation isn't optimal. And also, definitely don't make this decision in an emotional place at all. Never, this should not be, you should be totally stone cold and logical when you decide to do this. It's super hard to do, especially if you're a university student and this is a very taboo thing, and that's one reason why I really love this podcast, is because it gives actual real stories and good information. But it's a really scary, really taboo thing to do, and so you want to emotions ruin your decision-making processes, and you want both good and bad emotions. If you think like, oh my gosh, my business is making so much money now and I'm just a student, there's still a very good chance like you may hit some dire straits in the future. So don't just drop out because you're excited about your business, or don't drop out because you're angry at this professor, or it's a situation that you don't find very, very fun. You really want this to be a carefully planned move.
Yeah. Good word. And a last piece of advice for any of our listeners who've already dropped out and who are already on their entrepreneurial journey.
I would say, again, always be looking to add value to people, and don't be so. Be judicious on who you work with, but also understand that the relationships you create now and the seeds you plant are going to unfold in ways that you can't possibly anticipate and expect. The person, you may help out somebody in some small way and change their life, and it could come back to you in 10 years as this amazing opportunity. So yeah, always be thinking something like that. How can you help these people? And be generous with your ideas. Throw your ideas out there, because don't be afraid about people stealing them or running with them.
Awesome. What's the best way that people can connect with you, Kyle?
You can check me out and get in touch with me at kylegray.io. That's my personal site, my personal blog. If you liked what I was saying about content marketing or conversion optimization, you can find me at conversioncake.com, or you can tweet at me at Kyle the Gray on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, successful dropouts, you've been hanging out with Kyle and Kylan today, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Kyle into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish.